beneath the patriotic pageantry of July 4th lies a darker current in the American story. One not captured in parades or fireworks, but whispered through centuries-old hallways. Just blocks from the White House, an oddly shaped brick mansion has stood for over 200 years. Known as the Octagon House, it once sheltered presidents and signed treaties. And now, it might shelter something else entirely. I'm your host, Dan David. Welcome to City of Nightmares. Washington, D.C., as we know it today, is a city carved out of swampland, deliberately constructed to be the heart of American democracy. But in its early years, it was less a polished capital and more a chaotic blueprint. Unfinished roads, half-built buildings, and an atmosphere of political and literal instability. During the War of 1812, the British set fire to much of the fledgling city. The White House was left in ruins. President James Madison fled. First Lady Dolly Madison famously stayed behind, just long enough to save Gilbert Stuart's portrait of George Washington before evacuating. In the aftermath, with the executive mansion still smoldering, the Madisons needed a new place to live and conduct the business of a broken government. That place was the Octagon House. Located at 1799 New York Avenue Northwest, the Octagon was built in 1801 by Colonel John Taylor III, considered the wealthiest Virginian planter of his day. Though called the Octagon, the house actually has 6 sides. Its irregular shape was designed by William Thornton, the same man who drafted the first design for the U.S. Capitol. Taylor and Thornton had one mission: to build something that would impress. And they succeeded. By the time the Madisons moved in, during 1814, the Octagon House was already a social and political landmark. More importantly, it would be the site where President Madison signed the Treaty of Ghent in the upstairs study, officially ending the War of 1812. But once the pageantry fades and the treaty is signed, what remains is something far less celebratory. A house that refused to let its history die. For over 2 centuries, the Octagon House has been the subject of one of the most consistent and chilling catalogs of hauntings in the capital. Unlike some locations where a single ghost story is endlessly retold, this place has a rotating cast of spirits, witnessed by both skeptics and believers alike. Let's begin with one of the most famous. According to lore, one of Colonel Taylor's daughters died in the home after falling down the grand staircase during an argument. Some say she was pushed. Others believe she lost her footing during a heated exchange over marriage. A second daughter allegedly met the same fate years later, plunging to her death from the very same staircase. While no definitive historical records confirm these deaths, reports of ghostly screams, the sound of a body tumbling downstairs, and the figure of a woman in white appearing and disappearing on the upper landing have continued for generations. One of the earliest modern reports comes from the 1950s, when a museum staffer who was locking up late at night claimed to hear a loud thud from the second floor. When she ran upstairs, she found no one there, but one of the area rugs had been violently crumpled and dragged across the hallway floor. In a 1985 oral history project, a former caretaker described multiple chilling experiences over his 2-year tenure.
You'd be in a room, alone, and hear someone whisper your name from the hall. Or you'd turn off all the lights at night, and one lamp would always flick back on as soon as you left the room. After some time, I stopped trying to fight it.
And then there's the candle. One of the most well-known incidents comes from a former director of the museum who told the Washingtonian magazine in the 1990s that she once saw a candle, quote, lift off the table and hover about 6 inches in the air. It stayed there for a few seconds before falling and shattering on the floor. No one else was in the room. Over the years, paranormal investigators have been drawn to the Octagon House like moths to flame. One group, the Maryland Ghost and Spirit Society, spent a night in the building in 2003. Their EMF detectors spiked repeatedly near the base of the main staircase, corresponding, they claimed, to cold spots that registered nearly 15 degrees cooler than the rest of the house. In one EVP session, a female voice was faintly heard saying, "He pushed me." The investigators reported it came from the upper landing, exactly where the supposed fatal argument had taken place. Another paranormal team from Virginia, featured on a local cable access show in 2007, recorded what they described as a mournful humming coming from the attic. Despite no electricity in that part of the home, and no functioning air systems that could explain the sound. The audio was grainy, but unsettling. Current staff at the Octagon Museum have spoken, off the record of course, about strange happenings even in recent years. One longtime guide described a repeating occurrence with school groups.
Every time I give the tour to fourth graders, at least one child says they see a woman standing in the stairwell mirror, even when no one else is around. One girl even said, "She's crying because her father's mad." That sent chills down my spine.
Another guide, when asked about the hauntings in a local TV segment, paused and simply said, "Let's just say I don't like being the last one here at night." Not all spirits at the Octagon are said to be violent or sorrowful. Some guests have reported hearing quiet classical music drifting from the walls, possibly a remnant of the lavish parties the Talos used to throw. Others have smelled lavender perfume in the study room, believed by some to be the scent favored by Dolly Madison. There's even a persistent claim that enslaved individuals who lived and worked in the home have made their presence known. Some visitors have reported hearing distant chains or moaning from behind what was once the servants' staircase. It's a somber reminder that the home's grandeur was built on exploitation, and that the walls may still echo with voices long silenced. Today, the Octagon House is owned and operated by the American Institute of Architects. It functions as a museum, though due to structural preservation, tours are limited. Still, it remains one of the few buildings in DC that connects the political, architectural, and supernatural histories of the United States. And on this Independence Day, while many gather to celebrate freedom, the Octagon House reminds us that our past isn't always as quiet or as resolved as we'd like to believe. Some houses carry their history like scars, others like ghosts. Thanks for joining me for this special 4th of July episode of City of Nightmares. If this story intrigued you, make sure to follow the show. New episodes drop every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. If you live in the US, happy 4th of July. Please stay hydrated, don't blow your fingers off, and most importantly, have fun. To everyone else, you also should avoid blowing off your fingers. Just a good rule of thumb, really. No pun intended. Until next time, this is your host, Dan David, reminding you all to stay safe out there. I'll be seeing you in the next episode.
Nope.